we come together, two friends, yoga teachers, to have a conversation. What do you think about that?
I'm looking forward to it.
Why not? Huh?
Yeah, exactly.
So the first question is, what is something about your life today that your younger self would never have imagined? Wow, that's a great question.
I mean, the fact that I teach yoga for a living, my younger self would have said, "What is yoga?" I had no idea what yoga was until I was about 34 years old. So I don't know what younger self you mean, if you mean 8 or 10 years old, or if you mean 18 or 20 years old, or even if you mean 30 years old. But either way, I never even knew about yoga until I was in my mid-30s. So that's definitely a surprise. Yeah, but I will say that yoga has allowed me to do things that I always wanted to do. And I never expected yoga to be the thing that got me there. Like, I love to travel. I love to have adventures. And I never expected when I started teaching yoga that it was going to take me all around the world. So that's been another unexpected gift for sure.
Wow.
What about you? Can I ask you the same question?
Yeah, sure. I think, I was always very driven to any idea that came in mind that I wanted to do. Mm-hmm. But of course, yoga gave me such a avenue, like a way, a path.
When did you start practicing yoga?
I started practicing at 20, as soon as I graduated.
So just like 2 or 3 years ago.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I would never think that I would be doing it full time and travel the world and train teachers and all that stuff that has happened all these years. But I feel extremely grateful that I had the chance to follow the path and listen and take it in and saying yes. So, yeah, my younger self would never think that I would be, if we can call ourselves, professional yoga teacher.
I think that's a fair way of describing it.
Yeah.
Do it professionally.
We do it professionally. And we're having a good time with it too.
A great time.
Yeah.
I never expected it would be such a great time. I never thought, like you, that I was going to be doing it for a career. I didn't even know you could teach yoga as a career. In fact, right before I did my teacher training, there was a woman who owned a studio in Venice, in California, where I live, as you know. And I said to her, "How do you make a living as a yoga teacher?" And she laughed. She said, "Oh, you don't." She said, "You either have another job or you have somebody who supports you." And I thought, it's not going to work for me. So it was interesting because I just understood instinctively that was somebody who could only teach me so much. I needed to find somebody else who understood how to do it the way I wanted to do it. So she was a great teacher. She got me started. She helped me understand a lot of things. She sort of lit the fire. But then I needed to find other teachers who had a different point of view.
I remember Annie Carpenter. She was one of my first teachers that said, "Oh, please don't quit your job." Just start teaching yoga, but don't quit your job.
Right.
When the time is right and you can manage with only teaching yoga, then quit your job. But it's evolving. You can rush it.
Right.
But I think there is a level of integration that you need the time to figure out who you are, make mistakes, teach different type of people, figure out who you are as a teacher. And it never ends. It's evolving. It's always evolving. Yeah.
Yeah. And it keeps changing. So there's a couple of things that came to mind as you were talking. So I feel very lucky that I didn't find yoga until I was in my mid-30s, because I had already had a certain amount of life experience at that point that made me feel pretty ready to step in front of a class and teach when the time came. I had worked as an English teacher in the Peace Corps, so I had teaching experience, just not yoga teaching experience. But When I first started teaching, I got out of my teacher training and I went to a class at a studio in Los Angeles. And I had bought a Groupon. I don't know if you know what Groupon. Yeah. So
discount something.
I don't think they exist anymore, but it's kind of like ClassPass. So I went and I could take a few classes at the studio for very little money. And I went one night and I took a class with this woman who I didn't even realize was the owner of the studio. I just wanted to take classes with different teachers to see what everybody was doing. And at the end of the class, I went to her and I said, I just did a teacher training. I would love to start teaching. I'm wondering if you have any advice. And she was very enthusiastic. And she said, well, you have a very strong practice and I can tell you know what you're doing. So why don't you send me your resume and I'll share it with some friends of mine who do the hiring at a couple different gyms around town. Because if you can teach at a gym, people don't really care who you are. They'll come to your class. And if they like you, then you'll start to build a following, et cetera. Then maybe, you can go teach at a studio. So I said, great. So I didn't have a resume though. So I put together whatever I could. I went to college and I, was in the Peace Corps, but there was no yoga experience. So I sent her that and a couple of days went by. I didn't hear anything. So I followed up with her. I said, hey, just checking in. And she wrote me back. She said, listen, I'm really sorry. When you said you finished your teacher training, I thought you had been practicing longer than you have. And I think that you're trying to rush it. I think that you're not ready yet, basically. And I was like, So it was interesting because it was, I think, the first moment that I put yoga into practice off the mat. Because in my prior to yoga, I would have gotten upset. I would have maybe said some things that wouldn't have been helpful and the relationship would have died. And we never would have seen each other again. And so instead, I took a breath. I did a little practice and I got calm and I wrote back and I said, hey, I understand where you're coming from. I know I don't have any experience, but I really love yoga and I feel very strongly that this is what I'm supposed to be doing right now, basically was the gist of the message. And she wrote back and she said, and one thing I said to her, I was like, with all due respect, I don't think anyone is in a position to judge whether someone is ready to teach or not without at least having experienced how that person teaches.
Fair.
That's what she said. So she wrote me back. She said, you know what? That's a fair point. You're clearly passionate about this. How about if I just put you on our sub list? I said, great. So a week went by and then I woke up one morning. It was like 6 a.m. and I woke up and there was a text and it said, would you like to cover the 9:30 class this morning? It's a level 2-3, lots of arm balances and handstands and stuff like that. And it was, I was like, sure, of course, I would love to do that. So I put together a practice and I left with what I thought was plenty of time to get to the studio in time. But I was living in Malibu at the time and I didn't understand about the traffic on PCH. I'd only been living in Malibu for a couple of weeks. And so I was going to be late. I was going to be very late. And I was like, I can't let this happen. Like I need to get there. So I drove completely illegally. I drove on the side of the road and I got into the studio basically like as 9:30 was happening. And I taught the class and apparently people loved it. So she reached out to me after. She says, hey, I don't know what you did this morning, but everybody was very enthusiastic. So good job. And there's another class next week if you'd like to sub it. And I said, great. So I subbed that class. And then she came to that class. And after the class was over, she's like, you're really good at this. I don't know who taught you or how this happened, but like, you were right. You're meant to do this. And I said, thank you. So she said, I want to give you a class. So she put me on the schedule. So that was my first class. I had 3 lunchtime classes, Monday, Wednesday, Friday. And, I think it was paying like $25, $30 a class or something, not enough to make a living. So this goes back to what Annie was saying. I was not ready to quit my job at that point to go teaching full time, but I was living very simply at the time. And I was thinking to myself, if I could make $700 a week, then I would be able to cover my expenses. So I was trying to get to the point where I could make $700 a week just by teaching yoga. And it took about a year and I was up to about like $500 a week from teaching yoga. I had picked up a few other classes. I had somebody who wanted to do private lessons, which I think I was offering for like $35 or something at that point. And then something happened at my other job. I was working as a nanny at the time. And something happened that really was not cool with me. And I said, you know what? I'm not doing this anymore. I'm quitting. And so I left that job, not having achieved the goal of making $700 a week. But as soon as I quit, I got a call from another studio and said, "Hey, we heard that you're, a good teacher and we'd like to put you on our schedule." And then someone else called and asked for privates. And like within a week, I was already starting to make like $800 a week.
Right.
And then it just kept building from there. So I think Annie was very wise to say that. But at the same time, sometimes you have to leap.
Yes.
You
I'm
know?
with you.
Yeah. So that was kind of how it began for me. And then just kept going.
It's very interesting though, because starting at a later age, I think you have that life experience a little bit and the maturity to know a little bit more about yourself and as a, a little bit. I'm just, and the reason I'm saying that is because finishing college, and we'll get to that. I was a scholar athlete. I played basketball. So I knew at 19 years old that I'm a basketball player.
Right.
So when I stopped playing, I lost my identity. So it was an empty space there. And that's when I met yoga. And it was a very difficult time of my life, because I'm not a basketball player or an athlete, who am I? So it came at that time that helped me kind of realize things about myself. But I would think that later on, with life experiences, you'll have, I'm assuming that it would be a more mature, not approach, but like definitely a more mature way you look at things.
Yeah, I think that's true. And I will say, I think I was probably more mature in some ways than maybe some younger teachers, but we all have blind spots and areas for growth. And so I think through teaching yoga, I became aware of other places where I wasn't mature and I needed to learn how to grow up in those areas. But I also think that different people need teachers who are at different stages of their own journey.
Very true.
And I have said to people at different points that in many ways, I feel like when I first started teaching, I was better at certain things than I am now. I'm definitely better at other things now than I was then. But I had so much enthusiasm because I don't know if it's just my nature and my personality or the way I was taught or some combination of the two, but I was very determined to grow in my physical practice. Mm-hmm. And I think from playing sports and being driven, I had a natural sort of understanding of the level of intensity that it takes in order to make progress in the physical realm. And so I was practicing in a way that was making me grow very quickly. And I was always thinking to myself, well, if I can just help other people understand how to practice this way, they will also experience growth. Mm. And the growth was exciting. It was like, oh, every day I was seeing new progress and understanding things that I didn't before. And that really like gave me momentum and pulled me forward. But I started to, so that gave me enthusiasm when I was teaching. And I think a lot of the people who were coming to practice with me at that time, they were feeding off of that enthusiasm. But what I realized is that most people, I think it's fair to say, they don't have that same level of drive to push themselves. They might push themselves in a class when they're guided by a teacher, but my growth was happening when I was practicing on my own. And I would spend 2-3 hours on my own, on my mat, 5-6 days a week. And I just think most people aren't going to do that. And so I think I was kidding myself without realizing it about the level of effort that most people were going to put in. And so that's when eventually there were other factors. I got injured at one point and that kind of slowed me down in my physical practice, but I was always interested in the philosophy and the history of yoga and the ways that the practice can be applied in other areas of life other than the physical. And so that got me more interested in sharing those things with people. And I noticed it caused a change in who came to practice with me. It started skewing a little bit older, but I was also getting older. And the practice was still intense, but it wasn't as intense as it was in the beginning. And so, I think you go through different phases as a teacher, you go through different phases as a practitioner. And
that's the beauty of it.
Yeah, exactly.
It's always evolving and always shifting and changing. And I think that's the great gift that we gain from yoga, that it never ends.
Yeah.
And this path has so many different ways that you can go about it. But definitely the physical aspect is something as an athlete and as well for yourself. I'm assuming that the physicality of things give you an immediate understanding of where you are in your own body. And then things can evolve and shift. And mentally, slowly and gradually, more space comes into place because you are in touch with what's going on with you. And it's beautiful to see how from the physicality, you can see people that are, and teachers that are mostly invested in that, and then shift and change. And it was beautiful. We spent time at Kithira to see the integration. I only know you maybe 5.
It's been like 8 years. I think I came to Greece for the first time in 2017, I think it was. I led a retreat to Crete, and I think I met you
That's when
right
we
before
met.
that retreat.
But I hadn't practiced with you before, like at that time. But anyway, what I'm trying to say, I can see how integration from what you've studied and how you weave in the philosophy at the beginning, your Dharma talk at the beginning of your classes. And it's brilliant. I mean, the connections that the teachers make along the way, it's something that is enriching the practice. And it's very authentic because your understanding, it comes into your teaching, and it's not faking it. It's not trying to be something you're not. And you have the physicality, but you bring the depth into it. So, yeah.
Thank you. Well, I mean, the philosophy really helps me in my life. And I think I've come to believe, I mean, I used to believe that if people practiced in a certain way, they would experience the same physical growth. Now I believe that if they can really understand the philosophy, it will help them in a similar way. But you know what really helped me with that was the pandemic, actually. I'm always looking for the silver linings in things. And, obviously the pandemic was a hard time for a lot of reasons, but I started leading teacher trainings on my own during the pandemic. And it forced me to pay more attention to the things that whenever I had led a training in the past, I had done it with another teacher. And so I had to, and they would always do, certain things, and I would do certain things. So when I was doing it by myself, I had to get good at everything. And so that forced me to pay more attention. And that's when I really started integrating the philosophy in what I felt like to me a more meaningful way. So, yeah, I mean, I think that whatever happens, there's always an opportunity with it.
What do you want to ask me from these questions, Brent? Is it anything, or should we go down?
Well, I think this question about what part of your athletic identity did you have to let go of in order to grow through yoga is a good question.
The label that you are an athlete, you are doing a particular sport. It's an identity. And when you actually step away from that, I lost myself. I didn't know who I was. I was really connecting and thought that that's who I was and I will be for the rest of my life. There's a particular lifestyle that goes with it. A lot of things are set the way you need to practice, the team, the sport. So when you step out of that, there is a lot of free space. And I think that was a very revealing experience for me. And it kind of in Greece, you can do professional sports or you can stay longer and play. But in America, you finish college and then that's that, only if you go to a very high level, but that wasn't the case for me. So it was a little bit quick. So I want to say that it was also it was hard because I lost that identity, but that's the first time I realized that we are not all we think we are, or the label that we put ourselves to be. And and that's when I had to ask the questions. Who are you now? What you want to go? Where you want to go? What you want to be? And these things start unfolding because I had that space. There was a lot of fear involved, though, letting go of that.
How did it happened that you stopped playing basketball? Did your time as a student athlete end?
Yeah, that's
Okay.
what happened. I finished college, and
Right.
that's how. I mean, it's pretty incredible that time that I was able to figure out a way to leave Greece and go to America on a full scholarship.
Right.
Something that it's very common right now because there is a means to get to for people to see you play and all that. But
Right.
so when that finished, it was an incredible amount of effort to make it happen. And when I went there, I really treasured the time, but very different than Greece. America is very different than Greece. And so it was a lot of years of extreme effort.
Right.
That it came to, of course, I graduated and I finished, but that's kind of like when you put all your eggs in one basket.
Mm-hmm.
And I appreciate that because you really can go deep. You can accomplish your goals that way. You center yourself. Distractions are not in place, you know. There is something when you say in yoga, the single-minded focus, that I think I was a yogi before I became a yogi. Like I really was determined to make that a reality.
Right.
But then after all this effort to suddenly not have that identity, it was a big shock.
So how did you figure that all out?
Somebody said to me, I think you should go to yoga. And I went to the first class at Yoga Works on Mainstream. It was a level 3-4 with Annie Carpenter.
Okay.
And I was an athlete, so you know what? Of course, I'm gonna be there and try. But of course, I was falling to my face.
Right.
I'd never done yoga before. She came at a certain point, and then she said, "You should go to a beginner's class." And then I said, I don't think so. You know, the ego, it was super strong. So I went a couple more times. He kept saying, you should go to the beginner's class. Mm-hmm. And then eventually I gave in and I went to the beginner's class. But I remember from those tough first classes mm-hmm. that it was that feeling of ease and quiet at the end of it mm-hmm. that gave me space to feel and connect with ideas of what I want to be or where I want to go. So slowly and gradually, things will appear. Right. And that's how I transitioned.
Right. And did you start teaching yoga soon after that? Or how long did it take from when you took your first class to when you started teaching?
So it was a few years, but definitely because I was in LA at the time, and at the time it was, I would call it the Mecca of yoga. There was at the time it was like around 2000. Right. It was so amazing teachers all over.
But I think we should be clear, there's the Mecca of postural yoga.
Yeah. Because the physical, sure. Yes, very true. Yeah. But at that time, I didn't have any other space. I felt the benefits of physically of what yoga was giving me. And that's why I was so attracted to it. But there was an amazing group of teachers. So I took a lot of different teacher trainings. And then eventually, after 3 or 4 teacher trainings, I went to Yoga Works and I took the training there. And it was I started right away. Right. It was frightening. I had no teaching experience or public speaking in any way. I remember the first class. I really hope one day to see these people and apologize. Because, I don't know. As I said, I was really young. So I was looking down. I was sweaty. I was into my head and at the end of it, people felt fine. I was in a nightmare.
How old were you at the time?
I was 23, 22, okay. Something like that.
Yeah. And so did someone encourage you to teach, or did you just think to yourself, I need to take this step?
So what happened was, at the time I was working for a company called Manduka. I think I've shared this with you. So the owner is Peter Sterios, that he's also a very good soul food teacher. Mm-hmm. And he had to go somewhere. So he said, hey, by the way, in 2 hours, teach my class. And that's how it happened. I was forced into it.
Got it.
But I'm glad he did, because that kind of,
I mean, he must have seen something in you that you probably didn't yet see in yourself, and he felt confident enough to give you the opportunity.
I don't think he had a choice.
Maybe.
I don't know.
Well, he
But
could have canceled the class.
True.
You know?
True. But to be honest, I do want to share this for the younger teachers. There is a level of discomfort that you're going to go through. And I don't think that ever goes away when you are in a good, in a new environment. And what I mean by that is that being in front of different types of people with different needs, it's a space that you open as a teacher. And when you first teaching, you get influence from everybody, meaning from the way they look at you or what they're thinking and all that. It's a process. And then eventually through the years, that doesn't affect you anymore and you get more centered. But it takes a little bit of doing it again and again and again to be able to manage the feelings, the energy, and yourself, actually.
Yeah. Yeah, I always remember there was an interview, I think, with Anthony Hopkins, the actor, and he was talking about working with Gwyneth Paltrow. And he was praising her because he said she's very professional. She shows up, she knows her lines, she does her lines, they do the scene, they get the scene in 1 or 2 takes, and it's done. And, that comes with, maybe there's a certain amount of natural ability and talent, I'm sure, that comes with that, but it's repetitions, and I realized at a certain point after teaching 20, 25 classes a week for 3-4 years in a row, I could roll out of bed and teach a yoga class.
Yes,
it was just
too.
all of a sudden, it was automatic.
Yes.
And you still think about it and you're not going on autopilot, but you just know what to do.
Yeah.
But I'm curious, okay, so you said for you, the hardest part of transitioning from athletics to yoga was the ego.
Yeah.
What about for me, because I played football in college and I had a different story of how football ended for me. But the idea of in sports, there's a goal to win.
Yeah.
And in yoga, there's nothing to win. It's all about process rather than outcome. And so I'm curious how that was for you transitioning from something that was completely driven by a scoreboard versus something that's just an exploration.
At the beginning, it was a scoreboard.
Right.
I wanted to get the poses. I wanted to go advance. I mean, I didn't shift immediately. I think that's why I say it's a process. It's a practice in so many different layers of yourself. But I think the first few years, I would go for the extreme poses. I would be there in the Stanga room and trying to get to the second seat. Oh my God, it was my ego was too high.
Right.
But then all these beautiful opportunities, teachers, injuries would come my way and slow things down. I remember Ayurvedic therapist that he said, I was in a car accident and I was so into the practice. And I went to him and I'm like, get me better. I need to go back to my practice and I'm going to lose all I gained.
Right.
And in my mind was still goal oriented and I wanted to get there. So he said, but yoga is everywhere. And it was the first time after doing yoga for 5-6 years that I've heard that. And that made a connection. To be honest, my physical practice, so many years later, it's not what it used to be. And I don't feel attached to that either. It has served me tremendously, has helped me to step out of the egotistical, goal-oriented mind and be more invested into what am I learning every time I step, what do I bring in the mat every time I step into?
Right.
I became more self-aware that the physicality of the practice, it's still fun and it's really, at times I'm really motivated to get there and I like the physical benefits. But I'm not attached to it anymore as much as I used to be.
Yeah. I used to teach at a studio in West LA on Sunday mornings, 10 a.m. And sometimes I would stop. There was a Whole Foods on the way and they had breakfast foods in the hot food section. And they had picnic tables out front. And there would often be other people sitting there eating. And usually people were looking at their phones or whatever, keeping to themselves. But one day I went and sat down and there was a woman. She was probably in her late 50s, early 60s. And I just thought, I'm going to talk to her. So how you doing? What's going on? And She asked me this. She was very friendly. And I said, I'm going to teach a yoga class. She said, oh, I used to practice yoga. And I said, why did you stop? And she said, well, I didn't really stop. But what I mean is the physical practice I no longer do anymore. And I said, well, why did you stop doing that? And she said, the practice culminated.
Oh, what does that mean?
Exactly. It was like, it just struck me, and it's always stayed with me, because at that point I was very, I don't want to say attached, but I was still invested heavily in the physical practice. There was a lot to still explore. I was getting a lot of joy out of it. I was making my living teaching it. And so for someone she was so calm and she was so peaceful, like you could tell that she had a yogic spirit in her for sure. And she just said, yeah, the practice culminated. And to me, I didn't even ask her like more about what that meant, because I just sort of understood that she got what she needed to get out of the physical practice. And then, it's like you have a ticket to a concert. You need that ticket to get in. But once you're in, the ticket's over, unless you want to keep it for your souvenir book or something. But it doesn't really have any purpose or value beyond just getting you in. And so I feel similarly about the physical practice. It's a means to an end on some level. And I still love doing it. But, I started when I was 34. I'm 50 now. And things have changed. I've had a couple different injuries. And I'm not trying to grow in my physical strength or flexibility anymore. I can comfortably say that I accomplished way more than I ever thought I was going to accomplish in the physical practice. And, that made me curious to know what else I was capable of. But I also feel like I went as far as I could go. And I'm happy with that. I went on a retreat one time and in Costa Rica. And my roommate was a guy named John Doyle, who lives in Santa Monica. Great guy. And he's a few years older than I am. And we were talking one night, and he told me that he had been practicing Ashtanga for a long time, and he got very advanced. He was maybe going through all 4 of the series, or all 6, depending on how you look at it. And then he got hurt, and he hurt his back really badly. And I said, well, what were you doing? And it was, I can't remember the name of the pose, but it's the one where you wrap your leg behind your head, and then you hook your arm around your leg and bind your hands together. So your leg is way down behind your shoulders. And he said, yeah, I was doing that, and something just popped in my back. And he said, I've never been the same ever since. And he was okay. I mean, he could still practice. He had healed for the most part, but it was a turning point in his practice. And so I said, as you look back on it, do you feel like you're surprised that you got hurt, or do you feel like you pushed too hard? And he paused for a long time. Like a long time. And he just kind of stared off. And finally he said, I probably got a little greedy. Oh. And I really appreciated his honesty. And I think that kind of, like in movies like The Lord of the Rings or something, fantasy movies, they give the main character like a talisman to ward off evil spirits. I feel like that moment was a talisman for me, because I had it in me to push too hard. But it was because of that I never did. I always pushed hard enough, but if it hadn't been for that, I'm pretty sure I would have gone to, because there were moments where I would find myself trying to do something, and I would think about John Doyle, and I would say, you know what? This is the moment where I don't need to be greedy, and just let it go.
What a space to be, to make choices. Although I think that's the beauty of this practice.
Yeah.
Like, gives you that awareness or integration of all you know, and the presence to make choices. This is brilliant. I mean, if we can take that to daily life, and personally, that's why I feel that this practice is so powerful. A lot of people think, they have all these preconceptions about yoga. It's Florida flexibility, whatever. It depends on what background they're coming from.
Right.
Yoga is a different story to everyone, but it's at the end of the day, the fact that it gives you presence, awareness, you can be here now and make a discernment. Is that the correct discernment? Like to separate what is this, what works, to deconstruct life,
right,
and then make choices. Yeah, to this, no to that.
Right.
It's powerful.
Very powerful. So this is something I wanted to ask you about because I realized the other night. So I got back to Athens after the retreat on Friday night, and I walked up to the Acropolis. You know, there's that rock just off to the, I guess it's on the like western side of the Acropolis, and it looks out over the whole city, and it's a great place to watch the sunset. And I realized that I've been to Athens more than any other European city, like more times by far. And I think there's a couple reasons for that. One is I just really like it here. There's something amazing about Greece to me. It's a beautiful culture. There's so much history. There's like the food is amazing, but it's also the people are so welcoming. Like I don't know why. I don't know if there's something about my personality, but I think it's just you guys. Like you and all of your friends. Like you make me feel like family. You really like. You make me want to come back. I'm always in Los Angeles. And I'm thinking, when can I go back to Greece? I like Greece is like I don't think that I don't think that about any other country. Like I like other countries, you know. I'm happy to go there, but Greece is always the place I want to come back to. I always tell people if I could live anywhere other than California, it would be Greece. But I was thinking about yoga and Greek culture while I was there because you see similar things in other European countries. Like the prevailing culture in Greece is not one that really understands yoga, or that if it did understand yoga, it's not one that really embraces what yoga is all about. Greek culture, in many ways, and at least from my perspective, is about staying out late, having drinks, smoking cigarettes, eating like a lot of food, and enjoying life for sure, and celebrating life. But it's not about waking up early and being disciplined with your physical practice and engaging in all of the philosophical elements that yoga brings to the table. It's a passionate culture. Like it, you know, if you're Greek, you get upset about things quickly, you know, and you have strong feelings about things. And yoga encourages a much more moderate way of living. But I always learned, or one of the things that stuck with me from what I learned, I guess I should say, is that yoga is meant to adapt to meet the needs of the people who practice it and to meet the needs of the societies in which it's practiced. And so yoga by nature is going to be different in one place versus another. And so I'm curious how you see the role of yoga in Greek society and culture in this moment and how you see it evolving. Is it something that you feel like the mainstream culture will ever fully embrace, or is it always something that like the Greeks who are a little different are going to be doing?
It's a great question because I came back to Greece from Los Angeles, and people, when I first started teaching here, people had their cell phones. They talked in class. There was not really a yoga culture or yoga studios per se. So I've seen the progress in the Greek community, and as far as the quality of teachers, more yoga studios, more people devoted to the practice through the years develop.
Right.
But we're definitely. We're interesting bunch. We definitely have a lot of resistance.
Right.
I think one thing that played a role that is it got a little complex with religion and what yoga is in the scheme of things, and there's a lot of resistance from a lot of people to explore it. But I do feel that even if the shift and the change is slow, I find that more and more people appreciate the practice. I always say that the physicality and using the body and the breath as a first introduction to yoga is a way to go, and then slowly and gradually you can go in deeper layers of yoga. And I see this happening. The community has grown. A lot of teachers have developed. They're interested. And to be honest, I'm not sure. I'm a little bit more open into what it. Yoga has to be adapted. It has to be to meet people where they are.
Right.
You can't just say that the tradition it's more important than make it accessible.
Right.
So yoga works was actually developed out of that. It was Astangis, the founders.
Mm-hmm.
There was the younger tradition that they were very particular. And then they saw that neither approach in a traditional sense was attracting people. Right. So they made it more applicable to more people, different levels. They can join a class, a lot of verifications, modifications. So what I'm trying to say overall, our culture is unique. And we do, as everywhere in the world that I've traveled, there is resistance to change. There is a belief system, regardless where you are and where you're from, that you carry with you. Right. And I'm very optimistic about our culture and our growth in the yoga community, because there is interest. As long as there is interest, there's going to be teachers like yourself and others that will come by and will be motivated or inspired. So I definitely feel that yoga needs to be adapted to meet the person.
Yes, for sure.
Yeah.
I feel like there's also, I mean, for better and worse, business is what makes the world go round.
Yeah, of course.
And I feel like people are realizing that yoga brings business. You know, we just did this retreat in Kitira. 30 people came from all over the world.
Absolutely.
You know, so, and Mirto, like, to her credit, she really recognized, because I think you know that yoga room was a conference room before. Yes. And I think she saw and said, no, we should take this and make this a yoga space and turn this whole hotel into a wellness like retreat. And it's amazing, you know, it's perfectly situated. So I think that the more things like that happen, the more people will open up to the possibilities of what yoga can bring into the culture.
And different teachers, as you said, with their personality, there's a lot of space for all of us. Different teachers attract different types of people, and this is beautiful because we don't have to be, we are unique, but definitely people relate to what we say in a different way. And it's very positive that businesses, as you said, or gyms, they invest in finding more teachers, that they're more knowledgeable, they bring different skills in, you know, and it's all positive because there is interest. I keep referring to interest. Interest moves things around. Like if you lose that interest, that fire within you to look and grow, then we are out of business.
Right. Well, that's also an interesting point, because I feel like there's been a shift in just the last 2 or 3 years where, and I think it's been documented, the number of people who practice yoga according to whatever metric they're measuring has declined a little bit since COVID. Because when COVID happened, I think there were like millions of people more in each country who started practicing yoga because they heard it was good for not just the physical health, but the mental health as well. And that became something that was important to a lot of people in a way that it hadn't been before. But now, you know, because of a variety of factors, but I think one of the main reasons is because the standards for teaching are so low. And there's really very little oversight. Like you said, you know, you can become trained online in a very short time to be, in theory, qualified to teach yoga. So a lot of people don't get a great experience. They don't practice in a way that really meets their needs. And so a lot of people have maybe stopped practicing in favor of strength training or other activities. And so I wonder about how to keep the interest going, given that a lot of people already have a preconceived idea of what yoga is. And some people have already just kind of written it off, thinking, oh, I tried that, it wasn't for me, without ever really having experienced the full breadth and depth of what yoga is.
No, I think that in life, you make choices.
You do,
and
for sure.
We are the lucky ones that we have this toolbox that we can use it personally and then teach. And I think I don't deal anymore with people. I'm not trying to convince anybody about yoga. I'm more invested in people that are already there or they want to grow.
Right.
And by keeping things simple, I try to relate to everybody, but at the early age, I thought that everybody should do yoga, and I was very an advocate about it. And I was like really having tough conversations with people and offer classes for free, and I did everything. I'm out of that space, to be honest. Now,
so worst that I've been to, Italy, where my wife is from. I love her. I love her family. I love her culture, but it does not mesh well with yoga. I think Greece is up there, but like you said, it's changing. There's a lot of people who are coming around to understand. And Spain, it's kind of similar to Greece and Italy. These Southern European countries, they're not about waking up early and being disciplined. They're about, the bon vivant, just sort of the more external pleasures, I guess. And even diet, like breakfast in Italy is like a cornetto and a coffee. Like, that's not, I don't even know how anybody lives like that, I'm like, can we get some eggs and some, something with some nourishment? So off the top of my head, Italy, Greece, and Spain have cultures that are definitely not conducive to what yoga kind of invites us to step into. And cultures that do well with yoga, I mean, I was going to say Japan, because, Japan, like, they're very disciplined, and I think they take very good care of themselves in general. I've never been to India, but India is so vast. And since I've never been there, I can't really say. I know you've been there a couple of times, but I think there are people in India who really live by a yogic culture, and people who are really disconnected from it. But there's 1 billion people there, so it's to be expected.
You have it all.
Yeah, exactly.
And it's a very different concept in India, what yoga is to us Westerners. Right. So there is yoga, as we know it, the physical practice or the disciplinary practice that you do daily and stuff. It's very different. It's not, it's by the way you do the physicality. Right. Yoga is in there every moment application.
So it's a very good question, because, and I don't know how to answer it other than to say that, in my understanding, yoga has always been something that sort of goes against the mainstream culture. I look at you while I'm talking, since you answered the question. Okay, so a lot of people don't understand, like if you say, where does yoga come from? They'll say, it came from India. Okay, true enough. But it wasn't even really called India at the time. It wasn't at all called India at the time. And where yoga really came from, at least in its the seeds of the modern practice, is because there were two cultures that came together. And they had different customs, different beliefs. They looked different. They spoke different languages. And they had to figure out how to form a society. And the society that formed evolved into a class system. And so there were people who were on the upper part of that class system and people who were on the lower part of that class system. And even though it started off in a situation where the class system was fluid, based on your merits, not based on the family you were born into, it became more rigid over time. And so people who were born into the lower classes stayed in the lower classes forever. And that became a sort of systemic oppression. And yoga grew out of that as a means of helping people who were feeling oppressed by society have a sense of their own self-worth and their value, and a sense of inner freedom beyond external circumstances. Mm-hmm. And so we still live in a world where you can call it systemic oppression, you can call it injustice, call it whatever you want, but many countries are a democracy. And a democracy is not something that rewards competence or generosity or kindness or any of the qualities that many people really value. It's a system that rewards manipulation. It rewards popularity. And so we end up with leaders and people in positions of power who are not really invested in the qualities that yoga encourages. And so yoga remains, I think, important and relevant because there are still in, I think, every country on earth who feel left out. And yoga is a way of helping anybody who wants it, because there are people who are even in positions of power who are confused about the way things are and who would like things to be different and who struggle with things internally, yoga remains important because it's something that helps people make sense of the world that we live in. And so I think in a way, it's because there are, I don't think any cultures that, like maybe New Zealand, I think is a culture that kind of has more of a yogic, um, I don't think they understand, they would say that, but I think their value system in New Zealand is a little more yogi. They care about their environment. They care about their social fabric. They care about helping people out. And maybe there's some other smaller countries that I'm not aware of. But in general, most countries in the world, it's because they don't encourage a yogic lifestyle that yoga is important to so many people.
I wanted to, I agree 100%. If you're in a chaos, if you are in a country that nothing works,
Right.
there is all of the elements that you just brought. And then you step on a mat, even if it's not daily or in the morning,
Right.
and you go against that and you're trying to find your way. I think it's powerful.
Yeah.
Yeah, because definitely our culture doesn't encourage it. But if you find the inner willingness to try to step out of what is the norm, it's powerful. So Greek yogis rock.
Greek yogurt and Greek yogis.
Yes,
we like them both.
Yes.
Okay, so on that note, I'm curious, what is one or two or three elements of yogic philosophy that you feel like help you deal with the chaos or the, if you want to call it, the brokenness of modern society?
You know, I used to obviously be very driven, and one thing that definitely yoga gave me, and it's a great gift, is patience with, eventually, not at the beginning, but patience, and then patience with my progress, patience with my students' progress. So I became a little bit more patient person.
Right.
And then through that patience, I realized that so many elements, but definitely one that stands out is to have that space of not react, but think or take in the information and take that space between something that happens and then the ultimate thing, pratipaksa bhavanam. That's my thing that in psychology you would call it redirecting, is how aware do you become to be able to not control, but control in a way your own thinking process when you go into a spiral of emotion or whatnot, which we have plenty in our country.
Sure.
How you can replace these thoughts and redirect your thinking process to be able to not get stuck, you know? Yeah. So those are the three things that I feel very strongly again through the years of practice and teaching.
Right. I like that. I often tell people that, our attention, because I feel like Pratipaksha Bhavanam is essentially a practice of attention, because things happen and it influences us to feel a certain way, to think a certain way. And so our attention gets pulled over here. And I always tell people, you have the ability in any moment, you can think about your thumb if you want to. You can just look at your thumb.
Yeah.
You don't have to look at it. You can just think about it. And no matter what's going on, if somebody says something that upsets you, if something's going on that you feel like is, an injustice or something intolerable, you can just turn your attention somewhere else. It doesn't mean you don't care. It doesn't mean, that you're not going to do something later to try to affect some kind of positive change, but it just means you have the ability to be aware of the fact that you're being controlled by something outside of yourself, and you take that back.
Yeah.
And then, Sadhguru talks about it a lot as far as inner engineering. You just, you get yourself right, and then you proceed. And I think, to me, that's what the essence of Pratipaksha Bhavanam is all about. And it's very powerful.
Yay.
I'm a big fan, in case you're curious.
Yes, please. I am.
I'm a big fan of sort of the core yogic philosophy of Purusha and Prakriti. And I know it doesn't work for everybody. And I understand that. But for me, it has been immensely helpful to just recognize that the idea, the framework of dualism, the idea that there is everything you can perceive, and then there's the part of you that's perceiving. And whether it's something that you love and it feels amazing, or something you hate and you wish it weren't happening, it's all just prakriti. And I'm really, like, as you know, I wrote a book recently, and one of the aspects of the book is going into the yogic philosophy and trying to explain it in a way that's accessible and practical. And I think it's so beautiful what the sutras say about the purpose of prakriti, which is just to remind us of Purusha. That's it. That's all it is. Whether it's, a war that's going on that you wish wasn't going on, or whether it's winning the lottery, or whether it's, whatever it is, it's all there, according to the Yoga Sutras, to say, hey, pay attention to what's going on inside, because none of that is you. That's just stuff that's happening around you. You can do with it what you want to do, but pay attention first to the consciousness that's aware of it. For me, that has been incredibly liberating. And, again, it's not for everybody, but as far as frameworks go, for me, that one I find to be incredibly helpful.
The duality is super helpful for me as well. Like Purusha and Prakriti are two elements that definitely gives you a perspective that you're not only in your head, and what is the reality that your head is creating, and that there is bigger, there is a different dimension of you that you just don't really tap into. So I love that aspect as well. And I think that it's not easy to digest.
Right.
Because it requires to get away of all the labels and get rid of all that stuff that you think you are.
The conditioning,
and the conditioning, something we are all attached to.
Right.
And I don't find a problem with it. It's just a matter of use it to realize the different version of yourself. Like, it's okay to be whatever you want to be, but definitely just don't be oblivious to the fact that you're more than that. And there's other levels and layers to your existence.
Right.
That's where I'm. Yeah, I remember a teacher, Gurmukh. Do you remember her?
Sure.
Golden Bridge, Kundalini yoga teacher. So I interviewed her a long time ago for a Greek magazine back in the day. And she came to our meeting with a Porsche.
A Porsche?
Yeah, she was driving a Porsche.
Okay.
So she came, and I kind of like, at that time, I was trying to understand it. I'm like, how a yoga person that is so involved into the yoga and her lifestyle, veganism, she was wearing all the white stuff,
Did you ask her about
I did.
Okay.
Of course I did.
What did she say?
Of course. She said to me, listen, I love driving fast cars. And I'm like, wow, you're a normal human being. Well, and then
for people who don't know Gurmukh, she's like this little old lady, basically. Yeah.
And then I said, okay. And then she goes, I love Porsche. And I said, great. And I have the means to buy it. And I'm like, fantastic for you. And then she goes, but if tomorrow you take it away from me, I will be okay.
Good.
And that was the biggest lesson ever. Right. It's not about what you have or what you want to get. It's your attachment to it that it becomes the problem.
Right.
So we can be mentally whoever we want to be.
Right.
Just let's keep space to that. Possibly there is a big possibility that we're more than what we think we are. Yeah.
Amen.
I mean, mic drop. One place everyone should visit at least once.
Greece, for sure. Yeah, have to come to Greece. But specifically, there are many, because Greece has so many different, things to offer. And I feel like I've been very lucky, partly because of you taking me to Thessaloniki and, giving me different experiences around Athens. But then I rented a motorcycle one year and I rode to Delphi, and I've led retreats in Crete and Mykonos and now Kythira, and everything is different. You know what I mean? They all have their own special magic. And so come to Greece, but then come back and see something new. And I still like Mount Olympus is on my list for sure. I want to hike Mount Olympus, and I want to get over to Corfu and Lefkada. And there's so many other islands that I want to see. So I feel like I have several lifetimes of visiting Greece ahead of me. Yes.
Okay, pick a question, Brent.
A daily ritual you can't live without?
Oh, God.
Can't live without? Is there one?
It's a very extreme.
It's extreme.
I know,
yeah.
it's like a big question. I don't know. My daily ritual, I like to walk.
Okay.
But that's not like, I don't know if I can live one,
Right.
but it definitely puts my day into motion, my body and stuff. I like my coffee, so I drink my coffee in the morning. Yeah.
Okay.
But can't live without, I don't know. Maybe it's extra.
Driving my Porsche.
Exactly.
One thing people would be surprised to know about you.
Well, people who know me, I don't think would be surprised to know anything. But people who don't know me, I think are surprised to know lots of things, because I don't know why it is, but I don't think I come across, whether it's in social media or just in people's impressions, the way I really am. And maybe other people have that experience too. I don't know. I can only speak from my own experience. But I feel like I'm like a really nice person, you know? And I think that people get intimidated because the way I teach is often very intense. And like I can be very demanding as a teacher, but even then, like I'm always clear, like this is an invitation. It's not, you don't have to do anything that doesn't feel right. But still, like people always come to class with me and they're like, oh, he's gonna kill us, or he's so hard, and I'm like, where do you get this? You know what I mean? Like I'm here to help you have a nice time in life. That's all I want. I want everyone to have a nice time. But my experience is the harder you work and the more you work on being joyful in your hard work, the better time you have in life. And so for me, it's all about make your practice the hardest thing that you're ever going to do, and everything else will be easy.
That's a very interesting perspective.
Thank you.
And I have to say, you are a nice person.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Thank you. You are too.
Last question. Come on, Brent.
Okay. So you already said coffee at sunrise, so we know about that. One book you've gifted more than once.
The Power of Now.
That's a good one.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. I think when that came out, it was like, really? We need to pay attention to that moment. Wow. We always, dream big and put these goals, and always my mind was in the future.
Right.
And when I first read it, and after that, I just like everybody's birthday, I would give that birthday. Nice. Yeah, it was very good moment when I received it.
The thing with giving books is people have to read them in order for them to have benefit. I've given that book to several people, and I don't know if any of them have read it.
I know. It's okay. You try.
I tried.
You did your part.
Right. I'm not attached.
Okay.